Okay, back to breeding cows. So anyway, what happens? Couple things. So we're reaching through the large intestine, through the cow's rectum, or feeling down for the cervix. And like I said, if you take an II class, you'll learn all about this. Filling the cervix, and then we pass the tube through the cervix, and the sperm goes into the uterus. And then the sperm have to swim through the uterus, up the horns of the uterus, and fertilization takes place somewhere in here, which we would call the fallopian tubes. This would be the ovary, and so fertilization is occurring somewhere in here. So two things. Normally when a bull breeds a cow, the sperm is released here in the vagina, and the sperm have to swim all the way through the cervix, which is only open during estrus. So that's why you can't breed an animal when it's not in heat or it's unsuccessful, because the cervix is closed. There's a mucus plug. So once the cow is in heat, or in standing heat, shortly thereafter is when she's most fertile, that is when we can breed her AI. So that is why the signs of estrus are so important. I think that's the main thing I wanted to say. So just remember, that is also why we can dilute down the semen collection from the bull to breed many cows, because we're putting the sperm much closer to where the actual egg is being ovulated. And so it would take less sperm. So anyway, I hope that is clear to you. And as far as this is rectal palpation, and this can be done in the big animals like a cow or a horse. And horses, the AI is slightly different. But with, you don't do rectal palpation in horses. With goats and sheep and pigs, we obviously can't feel into the cervix. So it's really kind of almost you have to kind of have a process down. With goats, we can do vaginal AI, and with pigs, we do also. But it's a little bit more of a complicated process, because you have to put the pipette through the cervix. In sheep, artificial insemination has to be done surgically, because we can't detect estrus in sheep. And the other problem with AI in sheep is we cannot pass a pipette yet. Maybe someday science will progress through the cervix. So all artificial insemination in sheep is done surgically. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about another process that happens, especially on dairies, or we have large amounts of heifers gathered together, or sheep. And let's say we're going to be breeding we want to breed all the animals at one time, because that's saving time, and time saves money. And we're in the livestock business to make a profit. These are not companion animals. These are meat or food animals. So basically what we do is we synchronize the estrus cycle. So we can synchronize when the cows or the sheep come in heat. And basically that is done by using hormones. So the whole estrus cycle, you will learn if you take a breeding and reproduction class, is controlled by hormones. And so basically that's what we do to synchronize estrus in cows or sheep. And so we use synthetic hormones that vary by species. They are all prescription, so you have to work hand in hand with your veterinarian to do this. We give the hormones at specific intervals, and that allows the sheep or the cows to all come in heat at the same time. The other thing that's done, that's also hormones, is we utilize CIDRs, and I have a picture of a CIDR here in a minute, I'll show you. But a CIDR it's like a plastic that is embedded with the hormone progesterone, and that is used to help synchronize estrus. So this CIDR is short for controlled internal drug release. It's not like a CIDR, like a seed, like an apple seed. It's not that. So this just shows a cattle synchronization program, which I don't expect you to know that. And every CIDR manufacturer, or every synthetic hormone manufacturer, and every cattle breeder has their own protocol for synchronizing estrus. So this is a CIDR, and this is a cow CIDR. The sheep one is like a 20th of this size. And so where this is inserted is into the vagina. So this part of the cedar is in the vagina, and then these little wings pop out, and that's what holds it snugly inside the reproductive tract. I'm going to slide back to this picture right. Oh, I'm going to slide back to this picture right here. So when we put a cedar in, we put it in the vulva, and the cedar part with the wing things are in here, and that's what holds it. And so it's like this plastic device, and then that little blue piece of plastic hangs out the cow's rear end. So you can tell she has a cedar in her. And that is how we synchronize. That's the start of the process of synchronizing estrus with cows. We do the same thing with goats and sheep, but the cedar is tiny. It's much smaller. But it's inserted into their vagina. And like I said, this little string hangs out here, this little plastic piece of plastic. And that's how you remove it at the end of your required period of time it has to stay in the sheep. So another thing that we do with livestock is embryo transfer. And everything that we've talked about already applies to embryo transfer. So in order to do embryo transfer, right, an embryo is a fertilized egg. In order to do embryo transfer, we have to have a fertilized egg. So in order to do that, we generally breed the cow artificially. So all the estrus synchronization, and especially if you have more than one cow or heifer, and then the process of artificial insemination is still in place. So the use of embryo transfer, or ET, is to the female side what artificial insemination is to the male side. AI has become very inexpensive in livestock. Embryo transfer is still quite expensive and is still used on elite females. So basically what you can do with embryo transfer, the huge benefit is it allows you to increase the reproductive rate of superior females. So with artificial insemination, we can utilize superior males. Here we're getting a female that's the champion of the breed, the best animal that you own. We will super ovulate her in the ET process, and so she ovulates more than 1 or 2 eggs, which would be normal for beef or sheep. And then we flush her, and we flush out the embryos after they're fertilized, and we can put those fertile eggs into other females. And those other females are kind of like surrogate moms. And so one ewe can have 10 or 12 babies a year. With cows, it can be even more. Cows flush way more eggs than sheep do. I'm not sure about goats. But with sheep, you have a huge amount of you have a huge challenge. So that's important. And the other thing is, a lot of times we cannot import breeding stock into this country. So we cannot bring breeding stock in from Europe or other countries in the world because they have diseases we don't want that are highly, highly pathogenic, very bad diseases like hoof and mouth as example comes to mind. So one of the ways that we can get those livestock into this country is by importing them as an embryo, which is completely legal. We can import embryos and we can freeze cattle embryos. Freezing of sheep embryos is marginal, but it's still done. It's not that good. So that allows us to import breeding stock, and that is important. And the reason why is because we can't import live breeding stock. We can import them to Canada where they have to quarantine for a certain time period depending on the species, and then we can bring them into the US. But it's much more efficient if we can bring them in as an embryo, as a frozen embryo. Okay, so embryo transfer has one other word that's kind of added to the process. So in order to get as many embryos out of a female, we superovulate the superior female. So that superior animal is called the donor. So the donor is superovulated, and basically she is treated with a whole regimen of hormones to cause her to ovulate more than 1 egg. And so she may ovulate, I had a ewe one time ovulate 10 eggs. So I could have gotten 10 lambs from that one ewe. And then once we do that, then we put those eggs into a recipient or a recip, and that's like the surrogate mom. So the surrogate mom contributes no DNA. All she is a house. All she is a uterus for the baby to grow in, because we're importing an embryo. So here's kind of the process. So the donor female is superovulated. We have to first breed her AI. First we have to sink her, breed her AI, In the process, we treat her with extra hormones to get her to ovulate more than one egg, and then more than one egg is fertilized. And then those embryos are flushed from her. And in sheep, it's a surgical process, very stressful. And in cows, it's non-surgical. And then the embryos are graded, which is fascinating. This is why you want to do something else, because besides be a veterinarian, there's the whole realm of animal reproduction is so open for your future. So we grade the embryos, and then we freeze them or we implant them. And the whole grading of embryos I know a little bit about. It's really fascinating. So then on the flip side, we have one donor. We have, for every one in sheep, for every one donor we have 5 recips ready to go. So the recipes don't have to be good, from a conformation standpoint, but they have to be good moms. So they have to be good. They have to have good feet and legs, like we learned about in the judging class last chapter. They have to be good milk producers, because they're going to raise this really good high quality baby from the donor. But they don't have to be pretty. They have to be functional. So we synchronize them, but we don't AI them, right? We don't want them to be, we don't want them to carry a baby. So we synchronize them, we let them go past their estrus, and we don't breed them. And then once they go past their estrus, their reproductive system, their uterus, the lining of the uterus is ready for a baby. So we can then put that embryo into that recip's uterus, and then the baby starts to grow. And that's when you cross your fingers and wait. So the whole embryo transfer process for sheep, it costs you between $1,000 and $1,200 per donor. So it's not for everyone, and it's for those elite animals. But it is really important because it allows you to expand your flock faster by using that superior female side. So anyway, I want you to understand the difference between donor and recip. Hopefully you got that. So that's embryo transfer. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about in the last 3 minutes class is cloning. So cloning used to be, something like going to Mars, but now cloning is really an everyday part of livestock production in modern agriculture. So basically what cloning is creating a biological copy of an organism. So it's an identical copy of an organism. And I'm sure you guys are old enough to remember Dolly was the first sheep that was cloned in 1996. I remember that. It was like huge. And there were so many people critical of the process. But it like all of science, has its positives and negatives. So the positives of cloning is you can reproduce a superior animal. The other positive that maybe some of you relate to even more is that you can reproduce animals that are nearly extinct. So cloning might allow us to produce the next white rhino or black rhino, I forget which one's almost extinct, tigers, and some of the big cats that are verging on extinction and are highly inbred because there aren't very many of them left. So that is a huge benefit of cloning. If you read your book, I'll let you figure out what your book says. And I think the person who wrote your book wasn't very, first of all, maybe your modern book, the more recent copy is more up to date. But the book is very critical of cloning. So basically with cloning, you can use any body cell. It doesn't have to be a reproductive cell. It can't be a reproductive cell because you need the full complement of chromosomes. If you don't understand that, you might understand it a little bit later. But basically what we do is we remove the nucleus of the cell, and then we replace that nucleus with the DNA from our superior animal that we want to clone. And then we grow that embryo in a lab setting, and then we can implant that embryo. Once the cells have started dividing, we can implant it into a recip female. And the cloned animal is very, very similar. It's not 100%, but it's about 99% the same as whatever the original animal was. So I just want to show you a quick picture of that. Here is an example of show animals. I don't know why my thing is showing through here, but this calf right here is a very famous bull. His name is Heatwave, and he sired more champion show steers than any other bull known. And this is his 5th clone number 5. I think he has 13 clones. So you can clone, for $50,000 you can clone your dog. I have an assignment this week. You're going to do a little bit of research on cloning. So anyway, that's about all the time I got. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.